Hi everybody, TJ Mac Vintage Cards here, and today we're going to travel back to 1964 for our baseball segment. And here you see four 1964 tops of all-time Yankee greats. And it was in 1964 that the Yankees were on their last gasp as a power within baseball that started all the way back in 1921. Over a 44-year period, they went to 29 World Series, winning 20 of them. And it was the 64 team that won 99 games. They had Roger Maris, who you see here first, who had 281 batting average, 26 home runs, 71 RBIs that year. This was really his last good season. He was more of a role player with the Cardinals. And then you have Mickey Mantle next to him, 35 home runs, 111 RBIs, 303 batting average, and finished second in the MVP. Also, this was Mickey Mantle's last Mantle-esque season, I would say. He still had some good years after that, but this was really his last great season. And then next to him, you had Whitey Ford, who may have had his best season in '64. He didn't win his career high in wins, but he had 17 wins with only 6 losses, a 2.13 ERA, and 8 shutouts that year. So Ford, towards the end of his career, put together a nice season in '64. And then at the end here, you have the 39-year-old rookie manager with the Yankees in Yogi Berra, who only had one season that year. They won 99 games, the Yankees, went to the World Series, where they lost in 7 games to the Cardinals. Berra was fired at the end of the season and replaced by the Cardinals manager. So this is, again, that last team of the Yankees that was really a powerhouse. And then after that, they had some lean years all the way to 1976. Which is when they appeared in the World Series again. But there was one man who in '64 that just absolutely dominated that Yankee team. And he was so good that Mickey Mantle said, every time I see his name in a lineup card, I feel like throwing up. And here's that man right here. Here is Wilmer Dean Chance, appearing on his 1962 Topps rookie card. And it was in 1964, as New York sports writer Phil Pepe wrote, "It's Chance, not CBS, who owns the New York Yankees, lock, stock, and barrel." And that was really an interesting comment because Chance absolutely dominated the New York Yankees that year. Chance pitched 50 innings against the Yankees, allowing only 14 hits and 1 run, a homer by Mickey Mantle. In 5 starts against the Yankees, he threw 4 complete games and 3 shutouts, going 4-0 with a 0.18 ERA. In his only no decision on Saturday, June 6th, at Chavez Ravine, where the Angels were playing their games at the time, Chance was matched up against Jim Bouton. The two aces matched zeros for 13 innings before Bouton was removed. Chance pitched 1 more inning before departing after the 14th inning. The Yankees scored twice against the Angels' bullpen in the 15th and won the game 2-0. Now, Chance would go on that year to win the Cy Young in 1964, finishing with a 20-9 record, a 1.65 ERA, 207 strikeouts, and 20 of his wins were complete games, and he also had 11 shutouts, which was the most shutouts by an American League pitcher since Walter Johnson. Now, I think Dean Chance was one of the top 10 pitchers of the 1960s, if you just look at that decade in and of itself. He pitched from 1961 to 1971, with his best years being with the Angels and the Twins. And what's really interesting about him, too, is one of the characters of the game. He and his buddy, Angels pitcher Bo Belinsky, who was quite the handsome guy of the day. He dated many of the movie stars like Anne Margaret and Tina Louise, who was Ginger from Gilligan's Island. He and Chance were real fond of the nightlife as they would hang around with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and other Hollywood stars of the day. And it was at times where they would even knock Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale off the front pages of the LA newspaper just because of their nighttime exploits and also their exploits on the field. They were both good pitchers. Belinsky, not quite as good. He really just had a short stint as a good player. He pitched a no-hitter and then in 1962 and came to fame that way. But it was Chance who was the far better pitcher of the two. And after the '64 season, Belinsky was traded to the Phillies, and then Dean Chance would get traded to the Twins in 1966. He had a couple excellent years with the Twins, and then he finished his career with Cleveland and the Mets before retiring in the 1971 season with the Detroit Tigers. So I'm happy to add him to my collection just because he really fits into the narrative of what I'm building in my collection, just documenting the history of the game and some of the important players of that period, which was the 1960s, which was quite the era for good pitchers, and Dean Chance was certainly one of them. So here we see the 1960 Topps football card of Milt Plum, quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. And next to him is the 1989 Topps Joe Montana. So you might ask yourself, what does Milt Plum and Joe Montana have in common? Well, it was Milt Plum who had the highest passer rating of any starting quarterback in NFL history with a 110.4 passer rating in 1960. Now, passer rating is figured out by figuring it's a measurement of all-around play at quarterback, and it uses a formula comprised of completion percentage, yards per passing attempt, touchdown and interception percentages. And Milt Plum's 110.4 passer rating remained an NFL record from 1960 all the way until Joe Montana broke his record with 112.4 in 1989. So it's quite a long time for a quarterback to have a record, I think, or any player for that matter. And Plum's 1960 season was pretty amazing. The average quarterback that year only had a 63.2 quarterback rating, and as I said, his was 110.4. And the average quarterback would throw 19 touchdowns and 22 interceptions, because I've said many times it was a different game back then. But Milt Plum had 21 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. It's really one of the most forgotten great seasons in NFL history. He averaged 9.2 yards per pass attempt, the 5th highest mark in NFL history at that time. He led the NFL in completion percentage with 60.4%, and interception percentage with 2.0. And the next best quarterback in the NFL threw more than twice as many interceptions as Milt Plum. Now, as part of his 13-year career, it looked early on like Milt Plum was going to be a Hall of Famer. He was that good. And he played for the Browns from 1957 to 1961. He went to 2 Pro Bowls, and he was a second-team All-Pro. And then Plum was the Browns starter from 58 to 61. And as a starter, he was 33, 16, and 2. And he, like I said, was probably on his way to the Hall of Fame until he made a mistake, and it was a fatal mistake of criticizing Coach Paul Brown's play calling. And Paul Brown was a tough guy. He once traded Hall of Fame defensive end Doug Atkins to the Chicago Bears because he belched at a team meeting. He was just kind of a real conservative gentleman, and he did not like to have his locker room upset too much. So Plum, after a Pro Bowl season in 1961, was traded to the Detroit Lions. He found immediate success that year, not as much statistically, but record-wise with the Lions, going 11-3 as a starter. But he was not the same quarterback. His interceptions went way up, and he was 12 and 22-4 after that 62 season, when he went 11-3, and then he retired in 1969. So sometimes it goes to show you, if you stay with a certain team, you might have had a much different career path than he did. So, again, somebody I really like having in my collection. This Milt Plum card was probably $10, if that, and it's just nice to have somebody that has some historical significance in the game of football. And it's a card that I do display in my card room. I have my Uncommon Commons case that I put together, and he's one of the cards that I put in there, just because there's a great story with him. So now, speaking of Joe Montana, just to make a further connection here, I'm doing a video response for a newcomer in the community, the Drew, and his video response is about talking about a player that you just really couldn't stand when you, either now or I suppose when you were growing up. And to be honest with you, I'm more of a sports historian now than a fan per se, and I really have a lot of appreciation for many of the players that played the game. And I don't have as much emotion tied up in it anymore. But I can say this, when I was a kid, I could not stand Joe Montana. And it's mainly because he was a fantastic quarterback, certainly one of the best to ever play the game. But I was a Dallas Cowboys fan, and it was here in 1981, and this is a Joe Montana rookie card, just beautiful example of this card. And it was that 1981 season, and I was a kid, and again, a die-hard Cowboys fan, and Joe Montana broke my heart. So he is one guy that I really did not like when I was growing up because of what he did to the Cowboys, and he just was a quarterback of excellence thereafter, taking the 49ers to several playoffs. Of course, they won 4 Super Bowls in the 1980s, and he broke a young kid's heart, and a big-time Dallas Cowboy fan and myself. So I wanted to definitely recognize him. I thought of some baseball players, but to be honest with you, I'm not a Red Sox fan by any means because I like the Yankees. But when I grew up, the Red Sox really didn't do much against the Yankees, so there weren't many players I would say I disliked on that team. And for a lot of my childhood, the Yankees weren't even that great. But I will say that Joe Montana was one guy that I did not care for. But again, looking back on his career as somebody who more appreciates the history of sports, I do like him now more than I would have certainly back then. So I just want to, again, recognize the Drew. I'll put a link again down to his channel. I shouted him out recently, but he's doing some good things over there with his storytelling, and I just want to further support his channel. He's around 51 subscribers, I believe, right now. So everybody have a great day. That's all for today, and enjoy your weekend.